Hello, everybody. Welcome to Picks or Players, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast with some betting stuff as well. And this week we're going to be going over, or in today's episode, I should say, since I already had another episode this week, but we're going over Week 11 for the in today's episode for the podcast. And tonight we got the Eagles versus the Commanders. The Eagles are a 4-point favorite, which I actually feel like is a pretty fair line. The Commanders kind of look like they're starting to fall back to earth a little bit with some recent performances. I think they were kind of lucky to be really in that Steelers game the other day because of that fake punt call from Mike Tomlin. I think they are a really good team still, I think, but I do think they still are kind of peaking a little bit early in their development as a young team. And the Eagles have been pretty consistent, even though they have shown some blemishes here and there this season so far. But I do think the Eagles win this game. I would expect a big night from a lot of their offensive weapons. AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, I think, could have really big games. And I like Barkley as well to get a lot of carries in this offense this week. I mean, obviously that's what always happens, but over 19.5 at plus 102, I think that's a really solid number for a game that I expect them to be up in for the most part. I think that they will want to have a lot of time of possession and really chew things down with Barkley in the later half of this game. But, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, both healthy for this game. I expect them to both get a decent amount of receptions and targets. Another bet I really like, just because the threshold is so low, is Jahan Dotson over 7.5 receiving yards. And with Jahan Dotson, I mean, he's actually been having some solid involvement the past couple weeks. If you look at earlier in the season, not so much, but against the Jags, he had 36 yards, and against the Cowboys, he had 27 yards. And given those weren't really very close games, you would expect something like that. But it seems like his involvement in the offense has gone up in the past few weeks. So I would bet over 7.5 with confidence, along with the over 19.5 carries from Saquon Barkley. But yeah, no, I like both of those bets, and I think this will be an interesting game to see how the Commanders keep developing as a team. I think they're starting to show some blemishes for sure. But yeah, moving on from that, we got the Bears against the Packers, and the Packers are a 5.5 point favorite in Chicago. The Bears have absolutely looked anemic the past few weeks, and so I really don't have very much faith that they're going to bounce back in this game, even with the firing of Shane Waldron. Their offenses just look so bad. But if anything, I would expect a bounce back game from DJ Moore. He's really been underwhelming this season overall, but that's kind of been the story for most of the Chicago Bears weapons. But I do think this is going to be a lower scoring game, so I don't really see the Packers really dominating from an offensive standpoint. But I do think that they will win the game decisively because of just how bad the Bears have been overall, and I don't expect them to fix their issues in 1 week. So I think this is going to be kind of a stay away game for fantasy for the most part. I don't know if I would really start DJ Moore. I'm actually benching him in a lot of my leagues, given that he's one of my most owned weapons. But just because I'm not that confident right now in him. But yeah, no, we'll see how that develops. I hope this is a bounce back game for him. But we'll see. And after that, we have the Jaguars against the Lions. With Trevor Lawrence out again, Mac Jones will be at the helm facing the Lions in Detroit. Geez, what can you say about this game? The Lions are 14-point favorites. I don't see any world in which the Jaguars can win this game. They probably should have won last week. I mean, given how Sam Darnold just had such an anemic performance, but Mac Jones was basically just as anemic as well. But yeah, I would just expect the Lions to continue to have great fantasy games for you, minus last week, and I just would be very cautious about starting any Jags outside of maybe Travis Etienne, given that his workload was back kind of where we were expecting it to be post injury. I think Etienne is still a shaky option, but I do have some confidence that he will at least get a 50% plus snap share. So that should involve him in at least getting, around 10 plus carries and maybe some receptions. So hopefully a touchdown gets sprinkled in there and you got a decent fantasy outing. But moving on from that, we got the Raiders and the Dolphins. The Raiders are 7-point underdogs this week. It's hasn't really been a great season for either of these teams. The Dolphins had won against the Rams, but I'm not that sold on them right now. Just because I think offensively they've had some troubles, moving the ball at the same rate that they usually have been. Their passing game's a little out of whack. I still really believe in Tua Tagovailoa, but I just feel like that their offense is like Waddle and Tyreek Hill have really underperformed. I think Tyreek had a really good game against the Rams, so I feel hopeful that he will do well this week, and then maybe Waddle will start getting back on track offensively. But I do think that the Raiders do have some fighting spirit in them. Minshew has been terrible this season, but I do think that they can win this game, given just how anemic at times the Dolphins have looked moving the ball. And I don't think that their defense is very elite either, so they can definitely have some room there to have some faltering performances. But I do like the Raiders in this game. I think that they could make it close. But overall, though, I think this is a game I'm avoiding for fantasy. Outside of the key options, of course, the must-start players. But after that, we got the Rams in New England, and the New England Patriots are 4.5-point underdogs. I actually think that's a really decent number for them. They've started to look a lot better since Drake May has become the starter. Their defense has really performed well in some games, and they've been able to snag a couple wins over the past few weeks against the Jets and the Chicago Bears last week. Obviously, the Bears and the Jets have just looked, shells of themselves over this season, and not really shells of themselves. I mean, they're both just terrible organizations in general, so I really shouldn't say that. But yeah, no, the Bears and the Jets really haven't been all that great, so it's not like those are crazy impressive wins. But I think the Rams also have been very inconsistent this season and have really not been the team that I think anyone expected them to be going into the year. I think that they will move the ball decently well with Kupp and Puka Nacua, but I just like that the Patriots have played a lot better in recent weeks, and I think that the fact that Kyren Williams hasn't necessarily been as effective over the past few games has really affected this Rams team as well. And so they really haven't been as explosive offensively as maybe they want to be. But I still would expect good games from the Rams wide receivers. I just don't really know how many points they will put up together overall until they get the running game back on track. And I think with the Patriots, I like what I've seen from Drake May. I think they're deep. Like I said, their defense has gotten a lot better. So I expect them just to be able to limit the mistakes and be able to do and be able to keep a close game against this kind of inconsistent Rams team. So I think that I do like the Patriots in this spot. I think they can win. Um, and yeah, that's that. Moving on from that, we have the Browns in New Orleans, and geez, this is a pick 'em if you've ever seen one. The Saints have just been ravaged with injuries, with the receiving core, and we're having to rely on a new name every week. It feels like, and their defense, I think, has definitely improved over the course of the season. It's still a solid unit overall, even with some of the trades that they've made subtracting from it. But the Browns have just kind of come on the come up recently with Jameis Winston after beating the Ravens. Even though they kind of had a stinker performance against the Chargers, I still feel a lot more confident in them as a team. Um, if I were to pick right now, I think the Browns would be my pick just because I think holistically they have a lot more going on. And I like what I've seen from guys like Jerry Jeudy, for example, and Cedric Tillman, of course, like we've talked about recently. Um, I don't think this is going to be a crazy great fantasy game though, but I do like Derek Carr's over 1.5 passing touchdowns at plus 185. I think that's a really solid value. Um, Even though the receiving situation's not great, we saw him throw multiple touchdown passes last week with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. The deep ball still seems to be there for Derek Carr, so maybe he can snag a few in this one in New Orleans. Yeah, really hard game to predict. After that, we got the Ravens against the Steelers. The Ravens are 3-point favorites in Pittsburgh. Um, I actually really like the Ravens in this spot. I think the Steelers, um, you know, have really been impressive this season with how they've been able to grind out wins. But I don't expect that to be sustainable against a great team like the Baltimore Ravens. Even though the Ravens have shown some room to mess up in the past, especially on the road, Lamar Jackson is just playing at such an MVP level right now. I feel so confident about how he's leading this offense. I just think with Derrick Henry, they're going to be able to really run the ball and limit the amount of takeaway opportunities for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense because that's what they thrive on is just destroying pass heavy offenses and creating fumbles and interceptions with TJ Watt coming in there. TJ Watt's had a phenomenal season this year. It just seems like every week he's able to just create consistent disruption on NFL quarterbacks. And so I really like the Ravens in this spot. Just for their ability to be able to limit the mistakes on the offensive side of the ball with the running game. It's a rushing attack unlike anything that the Steelers have seen this season so far. And even though I do feel confident that Russell Wilson will continue to play at the level that he has, I'm not sure it will be enough against this Ravens team that I think is just so stacked on offense right now. But yeah, after that, we got the Vikings against the Titans. And this is a weird game because Minnesota really hasn't looked all that great, but the Titans have just been so bad this year that I really expect them to get it done in Tennessee. Even because, I think what we saw last week from Minnesota was probably the worst football that we'll see from them all year on offense. Sam Darnold had 3 interceptions, but I think he'll clean up his game this week and that they'll win probably a low-scoring affair in Tennessee. I don't expect everything to be fixed. I think the passing game still has some issues, but the Titans also are just not that great right now either. But I expect them to key in on Calvin Ridley and kind of slow them down as well. So, it could be a higher scoring game than we expect, but I think this is another game where you rely on your stud options. I think Hawkinson and Ridley are still really good starts. Obviously, you're starting Justin Jefferson, but other than that, I'm avoiding most of the players on this team or on this game. or in this game. Jesus Christ. But yeah, next after that, we got the Colts in New York playing the Jets. And the Colts have just named Anthony Richardson the starter again after a couple terrible seasons with Joe Flacco, or terrible games with Joe Flacco, I should say. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'm doing this a little too early in the morning. But yeah, a couple terrible games with Joe Flacco. But I really think that Richardson deserves this chance to start again. I mean, my lord. I mean, I did not expect Flacco to be that bad. To be fair, and I think that there was some justified, logic in benching Anthony Richardson, but I think it's also the right decision to bring him back now because this is what they should have done overall. Just keep him playing and have him learn from his mistakes. This Colts team is not in a position to really, do what they wanted to do with that until they had like a better bridge option, which they should have brought in to begin with. But I do like the Colts in this game. I think maybe they'll have a little bit more of a fight to them after some of the comments of that in the locker room in last week's loss to the Bills, saying that they need to work harder. Um, but the Jets have just been so frustrating this year offensively. Aaron Rodgers has just not been the quarterback I think the Jets fans have wanted him to be. And Breece Hall also has not been as effective this season as well, which has been disappointing. But they still have Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. So, I mean, you would expect them to be able to win this game against a Colts team that's really been struggling to put out consistent and professional results. But the Jets, I just don't know, man. Their defense is not as good as I think everyone thought it was too. They're just not that good of a football team, and I think the 4 point spread against the Colts is very generous for New York. I like the Colts side a lot, and I think they could definitely win this game. Um, Moving on from that though, the Falcons are playing against Denver in Denver. And I do kind of like Denver in this spot. I'm not gonna lie; they're 2.5 point favorites. And I admittedly have to say that I liked what I saw from Bo Nix last week, even though I said he was a sell. I mean, he has played. He is starting to. I mean, I don't know, man. And I mean, I just think that the Broncos are a well coached team, and I think that they're getting as much as they can out of this offense, and they have a solid defense that Vance Joseph is really coaching up right now. But oh man, I mean, it's hard for me to admit, but Bo Nix looked really good against the Chiefs outside of the second half. I mean, I still think there's so much for him to clean up, but this Falcons team has just been so inconsistent. Um, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to get these another big game like they have been from Bijan, which has been kind of saving them in the passing game. I think I think the fact that Cousins just hasn't really been as sharp, has really affected this offense. Even though their wide receivers have had statistically good seasons, but it's just not. They're really inconsistent offensively, and I think that they could struggle a little bit moving the ball in Denver. Um, I think this is going to be another lower scoring game that I like the Denver Broncos to just kind of squeak out of. I don't know if I have faith in Bo Nix, but he has looked pretty good since in some games, but I I just don't know, man. I don't know. There's still so many worrying aspects about his efficiency and other things, but we'll talk about that again at another time. I do think that he's still a sell in Dynasty, but you know I I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe he's a guy to hold just to see what happens the rest of the year. I'm willing to admit that at least. But overall though, I'm not sold on him yet. But after that, we got the Seattle Seahawks playing against the 49ers in San Francisco. This is going to be an interesting game. The Seahawks are coming off their bye. The 49ers are 6.5-point favorites. And I think this is a game where, we'll see Seattle. Seattle's defense is really starting to get a lot better over since the Rams game, they looked a lot better than they did against the Bills. So I think the defense, especially with moving on from Tyrell Dodson, I expect a lot better things from the defense. In terms of the passing game, I think Gino will limit the mistakes that he has had recently. And I think the Seahawks are going to play a clean game against this Niners team. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game where both teams are just kind of trying to play smart football. Because the Niners are still working some things out themselves offensively with some of the injuries they've had. And now that Christian McCaffrey is back, and he didn't necessarily look as explosive on the ground as he usually did, but that was against the Bucks also, who have had a pretty good run defense the past few years. I meant the Bucks. I think I said the Bills, but yeah, no, the Bucks have had a pretty good run defense recently. But yeah, no, I think this is going to be a close game. I like the Seahawks to potentially do something, but we'll see. I think this is going to be a close one. Which honestly is if the Seahawks even lose a close game, I think that's a victory for them because they've really struggled against this Niners team over the years. But yeah, after that, we got the Chiefs and the Bills. This is going to be a great game. The Chiefs have obviously, squeaked out some really impressive close wins. They just keep finding new ways to win. Their plot armor is so thick. And the Bills, I do like them in this game. I think they will win just because their running game has been so impressive this year, and their defense is honestly, I think, underrated. So I think Kansas City will struggle a little bit, but I expect Josh Allen to lead this Bills team against the Chiefs. I could see a high scoring game, especially with how good the quarterback play is from both of these guys. But I think even though Mahomes isn't having that great of a season, I do like his over 34.5 pass attempts and over 22.5 pass completions. I think both of those are good numbers. I think Mahomes is going to have to throw it in this game just because of how I think the Bills are going to be able to move the ball against this Chiefs defense. Even though the Chiefs defense is very impressive, I just think Josh Allen has been so has cleaned up his mistakes so much this year. He's been so smart with the football. The Chiefs are not going to get very many extra opportunities in this game. So I don't think they're going to have to. I don't think they're going to be able to rely on Kareem Hunt in the running game like they have been in recent weeks. They're going to have to throw the ball. They're going to have to get Kelsey involved early and often, and unleash something with Hopkins and Xavier Worthy. They have the weapons to be able to move the ball passing in the passing game. So they need to do it. Like, get these guys going. Especially Hopkins. He had one good game, but he's been a little bit quiet in the other two starts. And Worthy has just been so inconsistent this year. I still believe in his talent, but man, you got to get this guy going in the deep passing game, and it just has not happened this year. But yeah, no, but I do like the Bills in this spot. I just think that they are, I think they're just playing a lot more consistent football. But yeah, after that, we got the Bengals and against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football in LA. Um, and this is going to be a great game, I think. I mean, the Chargers have really found a groove offensively, and the Bengals desperately need this win after kind of choking against the Ravens on Thursday night. Um, but I like what they have with Chase Brown. It's going to be interesting to see if he can keep that up. Um, and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow just continue to be explosive together. Um, but I think the Chargers defensively, have been very solid this year, and it might be hard for the Bengals to really move the ball against them. I like how Justin Herbert's playing as well. I think their offense has just been really clicking, and they've been able to find some chemistry. Herbert's been able to develop some chemistry with guys like Will Disley and Lad McConkey, and Quentin Johnson is starting to really break out this year. So I just think the Chargers have a lot more going for them holistically as a team, where the Bengals are just really relying on their stars right now to get them through games. And then on Monday Night Football, I like this is interesting, but the Cowboys are 7.5-point favorites against the Texans, and I kind of like the Cowboys. I have to say, the Cowboys have not looked good in many weeks, but I think the Texans have been struggling so much. And if the Cowboys can play good enough defense and develop a pass rush against this Texans team, Houston will have a hard time moving the ball. Even though they're getting Nico Collins back, I expect their offense to be better. But we've seen Cooper Rush as a starter before win games like this, with the back against the wall. I mean, even if he isn't starting, we'll see. I mean, I think this Texans team could be overrated right now still, even though they almost beat the Lions last week in a really spirited performance for the most of that game defensively. I just don't know if they have enough to really be consistent moving forward with how bad this offensive line is. It's really concerning. It's their statistics are right up there with some of the worst O lines in the league, like the Seahawks. So it's really concerning what's going on with this Texans offensive line. But yeah, overall though, I do like the Cowboys in this spot. I think they're going to be able to move the ball. So I don't think it's going to be a terrible performance for them offensively. But I just think the Texans, they still have a lot of things to work out on offense. They're having to rely on Joe Mixon a lot, and he's been playing really well this year. But, I think the Cowboys could have a chance to win this game. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.